I want to talk to you guys a bit about spiritual bypassing and hopefully share a bit of my experience in that to be of value to you. When I was in my late teens, I was taking a lot of psychedelic drugs, was heavily involved in a lot of hardcore spiritual communities. I was doing these 10-day Vipassana retreats. I was reading the Eckhart Tolle and the Rupert Spira and the Muji, and I was really, really heavily invested. I was really heavily invested in pursuing this spiritual enlightenment stuff. And I'm not going to just start demonizing those things. I'm not saying that any of these things are bad in and of themselves. I'm just sort of speaking in my experience. I think that the reason I got so heavily involved in a lot of these things was because I was actually looking for a way out of the fact that I was actually really uncomfortable in my life most of the time. I had a lot of things that I hadn't worked through from childhood creeping up on me. I'd grown up in a family environment that was very miserable and pretty unsafe. And I didn't really know who I was. I didn't really feel like I had any place in the world. I didn't really feel like I had any just purpose, or I just didn't fit in. I didn't know who I was. And these spiritual communities and these spiritual experiences, they sort of gave my life a sense of purpose for a while, I think. I didn't have to worry about the pain and feel like something was wrong with me because I could just relegate it all into this category of having an ego. If I was having something really uncomfortable happen inside of me that needed my attention, I didn't have to think about it anymore. I just thought, okay, that's just me not being present. That's just ego. That's just the fact that I can't sit with that thing. That's just the fact that I don't have enough insight about it. And I'm not even necessarily saying those things aren't true. I'm just saying that for me, there was a large sense of actually running away from a lot of things. And I don't think I'd had the space or the time or the education to heal through a lot of this trauma that had built up from being in a bad situation, pretty much. And not really having any idea of like what I wanted to do. I know that some of you out there are going to be in the same position where you've grown up in family situations where you're pretty unhappy. And because of that, it leaves you pretty vulnerable. It leaves you in a position where you don't really know where to go next. You don't really know who to connect with. And a lot of the time we get involved in drugs earlier on. We get involved in smoking a lot of weed usually, and then maybe we're taking the psychedelics. Like the psychedelics are where it all started for me. And then that leads you into the meditation thing. And then look, maybe it's actually a really good thing. Maybe it's a good thing to actually learn to be more mindful and to actually learn how to sit and tolerate some of these things. I would definitely not say that that's a bad thing in any way. I think where it becomes negative is that it becomes a coping mechanism in and of itself, and it becomes very difficult to distinguish between something that's actually helping you move further and develop further and actually is preventing you from working on a lot of the things that you need to work on psychologically. If you were abused when you were growing up, if you grew up in an environment that was unhappy and that was unstable, if you don't really know where you want to go in life or what you want to do, or you feel like you have serious social problems, you feel like you have a lot of addictions to video games, porn, things like this, I don't think the answer is just heavily involving yourself in these spiritual practices. I think sometimes what we often forget, because we don't really have the education for this a lot of the time, we often forget that in order to transcend an ego, there has to be kind of an ego to transcend. To go further down the spiritual path, there has to be a durable sense of self. There has to be a refined sense of self to work with. I think a lot of the time we forget that. We just think, oh, okay, I've realized this thing and everything's an illusion. I just need to get rid of my ego, just like that. And it's like, it's not really that straightforward though. Carl Jung spoke about what he used to call individuation. The way he went about explaining it was that you sort of need to actually have an adult individuated identity that can function in the world and take responsibility before you moved into what he calls the unconscious, or the deeper reaches of the unconscious. And to be able to get to that point where you're able to transcend yourself, you need a self to transcend. Another way I heard it explained recently was by Frank Yang. He's sort of like a somewhat prolific spiritual teacher on YouTube. You might know his content. I find his content to be amazing. The film quality of it is just next level. And I heard him say that you have to be yourself so much that you turn yourself inside out. And I love the way he explained that, because I've been finding that exact same thing in myself. And I've also found in myself that in order to really be myself, I need to feel safe. I need to feel like I'm worthy. I need to be able to work through some of these things that have been haunting me. And that's why, especially recently, working on some past traumas and actually learning how to heal myself and learning how to communicate these things more openly to other people, learn how to be honest about what I actually want in life and not have to feel afraid when I talk about what's valuable to me, has been a lot more valuable, has been a lot more useful than just hoping that I'm going to burst my ego apart and become everything at once. I sort of realize now that a lot of that was like a backlash. You know, it was like I was sort of, I'm so unhappy with the way things are. I'm so unhappy with the way my family are doing things and my friends and my culture are doing things that I just don't want to be a part of it. I'm just going to transcend all of them. But it's got this sort of wishful thinking component, doesn't it? It has this sense of like, I'm going to get over all of them. But it's like, you're actually afraid in a lot of ways because you don't really know where you fit in. It's not so much that you just hate the world and you need to get rid of your sense of self and transcend through your soul. And it's really the fact that you feel so uncomfortable in the world. You don't really know where you fit. You don't really have that sense. You can be honest about this, like maybe you do, but for me, like it's like I didn't really have that sense when I would even go meet up with friends that I actually knew who I was and I was comfortable with what I was doing or that I was safe. You know, I grew up seeing a lot of misery, a lot of physical and emotional abuse, a lot of just like a drug addict. It's just a lot of bad stuff, you know. And I think the ironic thing for me is the time that I was most heavily pursuing enlightenment, I was going on these retreats and I was taking all these psychedelics. I was also a drug addict, a bulimic drug addict. And, you know, most of the time I felt, my cat's also upset apparently. I felt kind of like, you know, I just didn't really even know what I didn't have any sense of security in life. But I somehow thought that if I spiritually illumined myself, I could get all the way through it. And I think for a long time over the last couple of years, because I've recognized this for a while, I was sort of angry at myself because I was like, how could you be so stupid? But now when I look at it, I think I don't feel really anger anymore. I just kind of feel sad and like this sense of like, I think there was this boy there who really wanted some love and really wanted some support, and I was looking for that through these spiritual communities. And then I did the same thing with psychology. You know, my whole life purpose and plan was I was studying in mental health and was to go into the counseling field and become this psychologist and learn all about and it's like I still care about and I'm pursuing spirituality and psychology, but I don't think there's any like one answer like that and there's like some panacea that's going to solve everything. And it's been really difficult to accept that, but it's also helped me see that the actual process of life itself is really where the real education comes from. Not just some obscure teaching that promises heaven or enlightenment. I really hope that you could relate. This is a very short video. I really hope that you could actually hear something from this if you're a younger guy, particularly, or a younger gal, like sort of getting more interested in spirituality. And just keep in mind, as I've said, there's no way, I'm in no way, shape or form demonizing your spiritual interests or your philosophical interests. Just be careful and know that it really is important to have a sense of who you are before you go really deep into this stuff, in my opinion. You don't want to get trapped in this. I've went through horrible, I'm going to be making some videos in the future about my experience with psychosis that came from drug abuse and mixed with intense spiritual practice. And you really don't want to lose your grounding before you even have any grounding. Trust me on that. If you got some value out of this, you feel like this could be useful for you, subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. I want to build up this channel. That's my main focus right now. I'd appreciate you liking the video and also just commenting down below so we can have a bit of a dialogue. I want to be able to connect with you guys and hear what you think of this content. thank you for everyone who's subscribed so far and all the beautiful comments and feedback I'm getting. That's been a bit unexpected, and it's really just meant a lot for me. So I'm really glad that I'm making something that's valuable to you. And yeah, that's me. I hope you're having a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.